I'm just checking it out for us right now, Miles. I'm so excited about this chat. It is amazing. Just a second. So let me just check this out. So I think we're live. Yes, we are live now. So, Miles, welcome. Today, I am so excited to have you on our live show today. So, to kick this off, Miles, I would like a quick intro to you. Could you
Alrighty.
introduce yourself?
What's that?
Yeah, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Oh, yeah. So I'm Myles Madden. I'm a senior demand generation manager over at Observe.AI. Previously worked at Refine Labs, which Laura reminded me is some sort of an accomplishment. So I wanted to throw that in there. So I've been working with NBB SaaS for about 5 years now, specifically for marketing and demand generation. Of course, with how quickly the industry has been changing, or the craft's been changing, had a lot of unique experiences that have shaped my thoughts and gone through some unique things with some great findings and insights. So excited to be hanging out with you today. I do want to add, you've been trying to connect with me for a while now, Laura, and your persistence has been amazing. I really appreciate it. I've always pushed it down the road because my schedule got busy, but you're always very kind and continued to re-engage with me. So I really appreciate that.
So we finally got the chat live with everybody. So it's not just you and me, but us together. So everybody in the chat, please be nice to Miles, but you're welcome to put in your questions there as well. We're going to be picking up some questions during the session as well. And if you've got questions that we don't make it to answer during the 30 minutes, we will make sure to get those answered as well after that too. So, all right, Miles. So, as I said, it's like you can put the X's on your CV from now on, like X Refine Labs. And most of the marketers would know what you mean, at least B2B marketers. They would know what you mean and what you stand for. But let's put them something straight. So, now you're in performance marketing. This is what your title says, at least. And so, please give us a little bit of definitions in your mind. What is demand generation and performance marketing?
Absolutely. And this is obviously a big topic, and
Yeah.
you're gonna ask 10 marketers, you're gonna get 10 different responses. But I like to keep these things pretty binary and pretty simple. So I actually see performance marketing as a subset of demand generation. So let's start with performance marketing. In my opinion, it's a very short-term view, and in the context of B2B SaaS, it's really money in, lead out, and that's the mindset. So performance marketer, regardless of the channel, how can I do this activity? How can I use this budget in this channel? And how can I get leads out in the next day, in the next week, or whatever that time frame is? But it's typically very short term, and the focus is driving typically, like I said, leads. But if they're a little more mature marketer, maybe something down funnel like qualified pipeline or revenue. So that's performance marketing. Let's take a step back and let's look at demand generation. I look at this as a much broader topic. And I like or a concept, and I like to bucket this into two individual concepts. That's demand capture and demand creation. Now,
Mm-hmm.
demand capture, I use interchangeably with performance marketing. Demand capture are the people that are currently in market to buy. We try and go to the channels that they show intent to buy, and we try and capture them while they're in market to buy your product. And so that can be things like Google Ads. You can potentially do that through email. Sales is another way that you can capture demand through either outbound or typically outbound. And so that's the short-term view of demand generation, how you're going to generate business in the next week or the next 2 weeks or next month, next quarter, and so be it, that
Mm-hmm.
short-term view. Now, demand creation is the other side, and that's going to be kind of the long-term view, and that's where you're setting yourself up, or you're setting your company up for success over the course of the next year, 3 years, 5 years, where you're generating that demand, you're creating that desire, you're creating evangelistic buyers that are going to love your product, and maybe you're shaping that new category. And the misconception that I typically see is that demand generation is just performance marketing. I see that
Mm-hmm.
within my own company. People think I run Google Ads and and do website CRO and try and convert people today so they can sell them. When I view demand generation almost interchangeably with just marketing in general, right? Both that balance between short term and long term, creating results in the interim while setting our company up for success 3 years from now, when we've created this new category, if that's our strategy, and built a really profitable business that's sourced by a large percentage of inbound. That's how I view demand generation and performance marketing without going down too much of a rabbit hole.
Very interesting. So demand generation goes in at the very top, something that is possibly not very measurable. And I'll ask a question about measures right after that. And then going in down to capture, which is consisting of performance marketing, where there it goes, money in, money out. Stefan loves this, like he's got all this. Happy with that. All right. But if we take that step back and talk about demand generation, so can you measure demand generation before you actually capture it?
So you can. So demand generation, the KPIs that I use or what I'm scored on, especially at Observe.AI, which I've set with our VP demand generation, our marketing leaders, is revenue and qualified pipeline, right? So that's how we measure. And like I said, I like to use demand generation interchangeably with just marketing in general, because it encompasses so much. I mean, creating demand, you need product marketing, you need an understanding of content, you need to be able to do customer research, right? You have to have this vast skill set. And so I really like to think of it as the marketing scorecard, the demand gen scorecard. I use that interchangeably. So revenue and qualified pipeline. Now, if you look at the two buckets that I place it in, so demand capture and demand creation, now you analyze how those are performing, and those are going to have different metrics. So because demand capture is capturing people that are in market to buy, that's when we look at revenue and qualified pipeline and customer acquisition costs, basically how much money we invested into our demand capture and how much revenue or qualified pipeline we created. Now, when you go to demand creation, this is where I like to kind of use like a pyramid of it. So where you have your demand creation channels, which are channels that people do not have intent to buy, and you're educating them to hopefully get them to this intent to buy. And so things like LinkedIn or Facebook, right? And we use something called self-reported attribution in addition to software-based attribution to help us. And tell me if you're tracking. I want to make sure that the audience is grasping this concept, because it's a pretty big concept. So we can make sure that we're creating demand effectively through these channels, because it will show up in self-reported attribution as revenue or qualified pipeline. So I'll see, hey, LinkedIn created 500K in qualified pipeline this quarter. But there's also early signals to a high intent conversion, such as a demo request or or qualified pipeline or revenue, that you'll see in these demand creation channels. And the things that I like to view are, I like to do market research. So I like to actually go out to the market and ask people some of the challenges, and just have very curious, open conversation with them, what challenges they're having and what their roles and responsibilities are. And then eventually they ask who Observe.AI is, or they already know who Observe.AI is, and we have that open discussion about my company, or the company that I work for, not my company. And so that is a signal to me that we're creating demand. There's that recall of our company and the concept and the category that we stand for. And then there's also things like you can look at reach metrics if you're running paid media to see how much of the market is seeing what you're delivering, as well as the engagement with those. In addition to that, we like to run studies, brand lift studies, things such as ad recall or brand favorability to our market, to get their feedback on if they're recalling Observe.AI, how they favor it, do they know what we do? And we use all those metrics at the top to triangulate kind of like a top of funnel measure, something that they don't have intent to purchase yet, but we're warming them up to purchase. And so that's how we measure that demand creation aspect. But again, at the high level, it's qualified pipeline and revenue, because that's why we run companies, right? We're trying to grow a company. We're trying to make it profitable.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So kind of you're talking about pipeline, but still talking about the things that are still people are not in the market to buy. So it's not going to be pipeline soon yet. They are possibly when they're booking a demo, they're telling you some self-reported attribution. They would say, "Oh, LinkedIn." So okay, this is working. So nice to know. It's like which one LinkedIn? It's like I'm not teasing you
Mhm.
yet, but I might. But there's a question from Stefan about that as well because this goes back to measures and what CFOs care about. So if you've got a budget for marketing, and then you have to secure some part for demand creation, they care about money in, money out. Show me the numbers. So, how do you
Mhm.
explain demand generation for a CFO? They don't understand this.
Yeah, I'm really interested, Stefan's response back to my response as he's the CEO to see if my answer will fly here. But I actually don't introduce this conversation to our CFO.
Okay.
There's such a major divide between what a CFO knows in their realm and the marketing world. So I try and keep things as simple as possible and speak in financial terms. And so what we show to our CFO is marketing, aka inbound, created this much revenue, this much qualified pipeline. This was our customer acquisition cost. This is how much budget we had associated. And just from the top line, how much money did we spend? How much money did we make? And what was the velocity and pipeline velocity, which shows the scalability of that compared to other channels. And by speaking in terms that the CFO knows, that helps us fight for more budget. And so
Yeah.
if marketing's
Yeah.
performing, if we're putting a certain amount of money in and getting a lot more money out on the back end from the top line, um, then that makes our conversation very easy with the CFO that we need more budget because we can scale this more in terms of how we actually do that channel allocation and strategy. Um, Typically, a CFO doesn't need to know that. In my experience, when the CFO does need to know that is when marketing is not performing. And so that's when you kind of have
That's
to get in the nitty gritty and prove these things.
absolutely. Yeah. As soon as they feel that you're not performing and not able to come back with the revenue numbers that you actually are expected to deliver, then there will be nitty gritty details into all that.
Mhm.
But let me tease you a little bit now. So we are in the dip, all the budgets are cut, right? And now, if you were to cut your budget, so let's say now you are, I don't know, tell me where you approximately are in demand generation, demand capture, and stuff, where would you cut?
Yeah, we actually just went through this exercise. So, not because we're in any financial trouble as a company, but just because we love how this kind of environment puts pressure on the marketing system to figure out what we can shed, kind of what's the dead weight, and make our
Mhm.
budget work better for us. So, what we did is we started going channel by channel, looking at our different our hybrid attribution models, so combining both that software-based attribution, self-report attribution, and seeing what's actually generating qualified pipeline and revenue. So that was our first step. And then from there, it makes it very black and white and clear on what we should be doubling down on and what we should be removing from our system. And so we want to double down on what works. We also want to go into that channel and make sure we can double down using Google Ads as an example. If we've maxed out our search impression share, and we've tested other segments and we can't scale them profitably, then we've maxed out the channel, right? And we
Yeah.
can experiment with another channel or move that budget along. But yeah, that's what we went through. We performed the exercise. We found some certain areas that we could just cut out because it wasn't generating any qualified pipeline or showing those positive signals of effective demand creation. We weren't getting the engagement we liked. We weren't getting any market feedback from that area, which suggested to us that uh, we're not flawlessly executing on the channel. It's not driving qualified pipeline, so we're not going to see better results in the short term, which is what's needed during obviously an economic downturn.
Hmm. Very interesting. And Mel is actually taking us to my next question about sales and marketing alignment as well. There was her question is a tiny bit different that answered as well, and then we're going to move into sales and marketing alignment. So based on the CFO answer, demand gen is not effective tactic alone, and it sounds like it must be paired with other marketing methods, not just with sales. But then let's talk about what do you pair demand gen with and how the sales play in.
Yeah, this is a really interesting concept or a question, excuse me. Um, so that it's there's this thought that if the company is succeeding, uh, marketing is just doing its job, but if the company is failing, marketing is the reason, right? And so it's really good as a marketer to pull yourself out and look at the business as a whole and really analyze: is this a marketing problem or is this a business problem?
Yeah.
And sometimes, especially right now in the context of B2B SaaS, there's a decent percentage of times where marketing is the underperformer. It's not the effective, rather than tactic. It's not the effective department because they're not changing with how buyers are buying now and not interpreting the data properly or interpreting it with their own emotions. Um, and so in the end, you need to recognize, number one, if your department is really performing, but you also need to analyze, is this a go-to-market break or is this a marketing break? So maybe I misinterpreted that question, but hopefully that spurred some feedback.
No, it's fine. It's fine. And how do you, okay, so let's say for the optimal play of marketing, how do you play sales in your mind as a marketer?
Yeah. So I saw you sent me this question before. So there's a really important point that I want to make with this transition and the demand generation that I believe that what's been previously done is more of a lead generation model, right? Marketing's been trying to acquire a bunch of leads, and that's really all they've been doing. So this new model of actually creating demand to capture demand, aka demand generation, what I found before you can introduce this to the sales team and get buy-in is you really need to align your entire marketing team.
Hmm.
That's one thing that we've been working on internally, being a little bit of a larger marketing organization. I want to say we have 15 or 20 marketers now. We have product marketers and customer marketing marketers and marketing ops. And aligning the entire marketing team is really, really important. Everyone's building their own scorecards, and we want to make sure that everyone is aligned on this idea that we want to generate qualified pipeline revenue rather than leads. So it's a little prelude to the question. We want to
Yeah,
make sure that we
very
align our
important.
entire marketing team. Now, in terms of the sales team, number one, it's just presenting the data. So that there's two pieces of feedback you're going to get from the sales team. There's either too many leads and they're all crap, or there's not enough leads but they're decent. And so that it's really showing the data, right? We've got you guys this many leads. You're saying they're all crap. Here's the data. This is why we think we should shift to this model. It's going to be highly more effective. We're gonna cut out all the crap. Give you guys really qualified people that are going to engage in conversations and move through sales process much quicker. You can focus a bunch of your time on accounts that have a higher likelihood to close. So by presenting this data and having this open conversation with sales, it usually lands well, but it has to be, you can't force this on a sales
Uh-uh.
team, right? They have to be receptive to it. So if they're interested in it, then it's a great line. Thankfully, our SVP of sales is amazing, completely buys into this concept. But if you have a sales team that is like, no, we just want leads, you can continue to fight that good fight and present the data. Or,
Hmm.
I mean, unfortunate truth, if they don't get it and you want to do it, go work with an awesome company like Dream Data that gets it. Um, so,
That's, yeah. I see
yeah,
that a lot, and that's how we do that at Dream Data as well. We don't have the fights, but when we are lower on leads or like figuring out, okay, it seems like recently we got an influx of non-ICP leads. Let's look at that with marketing, and marketing is to get Stefan and the rest of the team in the marketing are in our sales calls as well, where we look at that together as well to figure this out. Is like, is this us, or was there something in the performance marketing piece that has made that influx of the leads for us? What can be changed and so on. I think that's
that
very, very important.
I want to really add to that. That's a really great point. That's a lot of people think that the big strategic changes and insights come from these big quarterly meetings and annual planning meetings. And what I found is it actually happens in the micro, right? So we have weekly
Mhm.
meetings. I think I have two weekly meetings with our sales dev and sales, or excuse me, our sales operations and our head of sales development, where we analyze each lead that came in from the previous week. We're looking at, job titles, where they're what they're attributed to, how the meeting went, what their job title is. We're looking at these very important data points, and we're having an open conversation of if there's any correlation, or direct attribution of where they came from and the quality of
Mhm.
that person. And if you think of that, us having that conversation over 3 quarters or a year, that's 52 weeks of us deeply understanding what's working and what's not working. So I really love that you brought that point up.
Sounds great. There's a very important question taking us back to demand generation by Abdullah. I would love to your take on this one. So, is it profitable to generate demand for low ticket subscriptions? Let's talk
Yeah,
B2B SaaS.
this is a great question. So, if you have an existing, if you're working within an existing category, right? Essentially, you may have some different features, or let's use a example of Netflix, right? Netflix, Hulu, all these companies, they have different shows, things like that, but they're essentially all the same. So there's not too much demand creation that needs to happen. You just need to win in the demand capture, for the most part. You may could create demand in terms of, maybe you have some feature or functionality that's significantly different that's going to pull you away from the current category. But yeah, essentially you're capturing the demand. So it's you probably wouldn't want to focus in terms of create demand. You would probably just want to use things like different pricing, or packaging, or kind of the 4 Ps in marketing to win against your competitors. And this comes down to more of a company strategy rather than a marketing strategy, right? Like, where do we want our company to go? Do we want to be the
Yeah.
second or third Netflix, or do we want to be the 3D TV experience that's completely different than everyone else and win that category? And as we all know, the market leader typically owns 80% market share. So
Yeah.
this really comes down to a company strategy. But yeah, I would suggest for low ticket subscriptions to capture demand if there's an existing category in market.
Yeah. And a follow-up question for that as well is coming from Ashik. So, how soon before demand generation exercise can it translate to qualified pipeline in your experience for like 20,000 K yearly
Yeah,
ticket size for B2B?
this is a really interesting question. I've heard a few different formulas, but my opinion on it, I've tested this now out with a few companies, both from the Net Refine Labs and the contract work that I've done, and now being an Observe.AI. If you execute flawlessly, you can still generate qualified pipeline in the short term. Um,
Hmm.
and so, for example, a few companies I've worked with where average ACV is all the way from 20K to 250K. If you execute flawlessly, you can generate qualified pipeline within the first 14 or 30 days. Now, in terms of expectations and setting with the company, for a 20K product, I like to base it off of average sales velocity. So let's say 60 days, your average sales velocity for a 20K product. I would expect probably a quarter to begin seeing those results. But
Yeah.
that's just an approximation. But yeah, if you bring on someone that can execute flawlessly, or you can see these results relatively quickly.
Hmm. We ran a quick calculation for B2B SaaS at Dream Data. So for our clients, I think we calculated for around 200 customers. We saw that from the first touch with our clients, which usually is the first captured touch with our clients up till the deal is closed with was over 200 days for B2B SaaS.
Wow.
And that might be changing, but now we're talking the full customer journey cycle. And for demand generation, like the very first touch, till pipeline creation, it is usually half of the time. So I would say like 100 days or something like that in the numbers that we ran. But it would be nice to look at the same numbers again next year.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. There's so many, I typically dislike this response, but it depends response. But there's so many
Yeah,
variables in this equation, right? Like there's the maturity of the category. If you're selling a CRM versus a contact
right.
center conversation intelligence AI solution, like the market for the most part knows they need a CRM, so that the time it will take because the your market is more warmed up to the idea, it's going to be significantly less than something that needs significant amount of education, additional education.
Yeah,
Um, so
agree. Agree, absolutely. I've got three questions that are, for me, crazy exciting, and they're a little bit
okay,
shorter in answer. So we're going to pick up a question or two a little later. One question that Stefan has asked to put in the mix was, how do you like to report upwards in the organization of your activities? Is it just pipeline or do you report anything else?
that's a great question. It's mostly pipeline. So it's especially talking upwards to the organization. You want to talk on metrics that are understood by the entire committee. So I keep going back to this concept of financial metrics. When we're talking to the SVP of sales, we're talking to the CEO or CFO, talking in those financial metrics, and then we will discuss earlier funnel metrics such as SQL that has
Mhm.
a win rate. Ours is around 20% to a closed one. So we will discuss those metrics as early indicators to qualified pipeline revenue. So we'll give context, we'll give the story, but for the most part, we'll give that performance of those top line metrics with predictions from those leading indicators.
Love that. You're far, far ahead, Miles. I absolutely love that. And now we're talking about predictions. We're close to the new year, Miles. So there are two questions about this year and next year. So, in terms of tactics that you are thinking about, that what kind of tactic would you like to stop or are stopping to do in 2022? So this year's gone. What tactic are you throwing out?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. I think what I'm trying to get away from in 2022 is relying on paid media budget. Which I mean, this is the
Wow.
gold standard, right? Like we all want to get to an area where uh, we're not relying as much on paid media budget. So we use that in 2022 to kind of throw what's that saying, gas in the fire, or whatever you say. But I'd like to focus more on our strategy around how can we either lean on the existing paid media budget, or even if we had to reduce it by 15, 25% and still
Mhm.
not only keep the current results, but grow those results. So looking at marketing, kind of putting paid media on the backseat, obviously still optimizing it, but not focusing as much on it. Um, and in terms and kind of what we're looking for the next year, it's really interesting. When we go through an economic downturn, obviously everyone tightens the purse strings. You get smarter with your budget. You're going to get all those cliche responses. But I think something that's really important to me for this upcoming year with the current economy is that we keep morale high. Right? We want
Mhm.
people to do their best work. We don't want to feel like they're about to get kicked out the door. These people are there's always going to be companies that are hiring, and especially in an economic downturn, we don't want to lose our best people. So making sure people
Oh,
are happy, doing their best work, they're enjoying what they're doing. I'd say that's probably one of the things that I haven't focused too much on this past year, and something that I really want to focus on this upcoming year, is I truly think that's going to drive some of the best results if we optimize that, if you will.
that's so beautiful. Well, it shows your personality through as well. I love that so
Yeah.
much. Like, especially in this time, as you're saying that, well, a lot of layoffs, a lot of budgets are cut, and so on. It's like underperforming, you're out, and so on. Keeping morale high is really key for companies, but also choosing companies you are going to work with, what kind of companies you're choosing to work with, and yeah, where do they put their like values where the words are or somewhere else, really. Very
Yeah,
nice.
and it sounds, now that I say it, it sounds a little fluffy, but just to flesh out my thought a little bit more,
Yeah.
when morale's high, it shows that your team trusts in you, they have confidence in you, and when you build that culture, innovation flourishes, experimentation flourishes. People are more bought in. Maybe they'll add that extra 2 hours in the day, and I'm not advocating people need to work more than 40 hours, but they're going to go that extra mile that may be the unlock to
Yeah.
generating that quarter of an increase in pipeline or whatever it may be. So yeah.
That's very beautiful. And if you're thinking innovation, is there an innovation or something that you're thinking, I haven't tried this, but I'd like to do that next year a little bit? Is there anything you have in mind?
I think the things that we're preaching, that we're still, excuse me, early adopters in this transition in B2B marketing. So for 2023, my focus is obviously to always continue innovating, but nothing groundbreaking. So like I said, straying away from paid media, focusing more on morale, but specifically the two things that we would really like to focus on is email and the customer experience. Those are two things that we don't need to invest more money in, but
Very
we can
nice.
create an email strategy that is exceptional, and we can, if we can create a customer experience that is very low friction, that obviously is going to help accelerate our sales process, and kind of the low hanging fruit. I know that's the most cliche business term ever, but like I said, we're going to continue
Yeah, yeah,
innovating,
but it
but I think
works.
those are the
Yeah.
two areas of opportunity for us,
Beautiful.
and I think for a lot of the market.
Mm, perfect. Miles, thank you so much for the fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it. There were so many small nuggets that a lot of people could pick up on, and we could do the same. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure loving what you and the Dream Data crew are doing. And if anybody has any questions, I saw the chat was blowing up over here. Feel free to LinkedIn message me. Myles Madden, Observe.AI. Shouldn't be too hard to find. So
Thank you so much, and see you out there, Miles. See you, everybody.
see you guys.